G'day and welcome back to the fourth episode of Adobe CQ Presents, Making the Modern Leader, where we decode how APAC enterprise leaders are really leaning into the emergent second renaissance of creativity, pushing the boundaries and challenging the status quo through creativity. I'm Anders Sommer-Nielsen, global futurist, author, and the co-creator of Adobe CQ, the IQ test for your creative leadership. And in today's episode number 4, we are leaning into the topic of customer experience. Today's episode is customer experience is everyone's job. And in this episode, where we do a deep dive into this new topic, what we are exploring is essentially an output from the other elements of Adobe CQ, and that is experience. And by experience, we are talking today about customer experience. Joining me on the show today are two thought leaders in this area. Firstly, I'd like to welcome onto the show the Director of Marketing and Communications, Johanna Lowe from the University of Sydney. Welcome to the show, Johanna.
Thanks, Anders. Great to be here.
Thanks for being on the show. And of course, last but not least, Suzanne Steele, who is the Managing Director of Adobe for Australia and New Zealand. Great to have you on the show as well, Suzanne.
Likewise, thanks for having me, and good to be here with Joanna.
Now, leaders with a high Adobe CQ, according to our research, are those that are proficient and confident in navigating and connecting data, skills, and technology to really understand new customer experiences and expectations, and who really drive customer experiences that really resonate with the digital minds and the analog hearts of tomorrow's customers. And experience in this regard is really recognizing that creativity is more than the sum of its parts, and that creative leaders are those that are able to draw on all of the elements of the Adobe CQ to really drive creativity and push the boundaries of the customer experiences of the future. And I'd like to tune in at this momentous time in history that we're experiencing right this minute, Johanna. Of course, the education sector, courtesy of this new virus, is one where customer experiences have had to really pivot and exponentialize given these social distance laws, the new internationalization or nationalization of travel. And I'm curious at the University of Sydney how you think about what role creativity plays in customer experience beyond just art and design.
Sure. Oh, look, it's been a great challenge for the sector and for us at Sydney. We've had to really rethink the entire experience. University, if you think about it, is a genuine experience, not just the learning component, but how you meet people, all of the components of growing up over that 3 to 5 years, or whether you're developing your career at a later stage of education. So we've had to really think end to end. What does that look like for someone who might be doing that from home, whether that's here in Australia or elsewhere around the world? How do we deliver the education piece first and foremost? And what are the tools that make that easier for our students where they are? In the way that they want to learn? How do we help our staff deliver that experience for them? And then how do we help produce some of the constellation of experiences that wrap around the education and learning? So how do we help them network with one another, build those connections with potential employers, seek experience outside of their particular disciplinary expertise? And that's been a great challenge, and one that the university's risen to with aplomb, not without some bumps in the road. But the thing that has been really refreshing is that we've all been so single-minded and singly focused on understanding what the students experienced during this period. And that's been a great collaboration of people across the university to make sure that our students are continuing their learning and that the pandemic can't disrupt them for too long.
And in terms of connecting with the next generation, school leavers and those that are considering university, both domestic student and international students, what are their expectations, and what's the university doing to really step up and innovate and create in this space?
Well, look, so much of the university experience, particularly for those undergraduate students, where it is quite a big milestone, where you're leaving home often, you're coming out of a high school, quite structured experience where it's much more self-directed learning. So we've needed to really think about what are the platforms and ways that we can reach them and help them. And then how do we connect them with their peers? So we've put a lot of peer-to-peer support platforms in place. We use social media extensively to make sure that they are making those connections to one another. And that's been really fundamental. And how we create the engagement with their teachers. And that's something that's not always part of the academic experience in a regular semester, where they're used to coming into a room with live people to talk to. So it's been a real challenge for us all, and one that we'll continue to need to deliver. We're now in a blended learning delivery sort of mode at the moment, whereby some students are coming in face-to-face and others are still learning offshore. So actually, we've needed to teach in parallel and make sure creating experiences for both of those student types, no matter where they are.
Suzanne, I mean, this is fascinating, just listening to this right now. I'm just thinking beyond education. What are you seeing? What's your perspective of this, across industries? Obviously, education sectors had to pivot and change. What are you seeing in terms of creativity and the role it plays in driving new types of customer experiences?
Well, I think what I say, and echo some of Joanna's comments, actually, this actually, we would say, is the golden era of creativity, and that creativity is really all about insight, collaboration, and ideation. And Joanna mentioned connectivity. Creativity is all about making new connections. And if I look at what we've seen with our customers, it's been amazing. We've seen most of our customers have to totally reimagine what customer experience is. What does it need to be, and what is it? And we've seen programs of work that, quite honestly, in the past would have taken 18 months, 2 years or longer to stand up. We've seen some customers pivot within weeks and stand up those programs within like 4 weeks, which would have taken so much longer. And how they've done that is by embracing creativity and empowering their teams to really think and reimagine how they go to market.
And so I'm just thinking here, Suzanne, so as a business leader, who do you see as being responsible for customer experience within an organization?
Yeah, I love that topic, Anders, and I think everybody in an organization is responsible for customer experience and how a customer feels when they interact with your brand. From the bottom up to the top down, everybody plays a role in what that customer experience should be and is. And quite frankly, now we're in a whole world where, whether it's in Joanna's world, where they're delivering seamless student experiences, or whether it's in the government world where we need to deliver seamless citizen experiences, one thing's for sure: expectations have gone through the roof. No longer do we sit back and think, wow, that was an amazing customer experience that I've just had. Actually, our expectations, we now insist on it. And I think that's really interesting, because those desires for great customer experiences are encouraging our businesses to continue to think creatively about how we reimagine that going forwards.
And maybe just to take it down, another level, who do you see in your network of partners and customers who are really setting our expectations and the sort of new benchmarks of digital or other styles of customer experience at the moment, Suzanne?
Well, there's too many to call out, to be perfectly honest. I think here, certainly on our shores in Australia, we've seen some real entrepreneurship and innovation in delivering customer experiences, be that with our grocery retailers who, really had to feed Australia during, early COVID-19, through to brands like Farmlands in New Zealand, who do everything from, credit cards and retail, pivoting within weeks and really, instead of just striving during COVID, which is why they pivoted, it was, we need to keep our businesses alive. We've seen a number of those brands actually thrive during COVID. So some great brands right across the nation. And to be honest, it's been such an experience to be part of that and helping our customers and our partners as they, innovate and creatively solve these problems.
Now, of course, the data backs up and augments your view here as well, Suzanne. So according to the Adobe CQ research that we've done across Asia Pacific, in fact, across Asia Pacific, 43% of APAC leaders are excelling and driving creative experience, which is the highest area in terms of where they're really excelling across the 5 areas of the Adobe CQ. So the data backs up that sentiment that you've just shared. Johanna, I'm curious, at the University of Sydney, when you're having dialogues with other leaders and people on the front lines, how do you speak about creative and customer experience and who really owns that conversation at the University of Sydney?
Well, at the University of Sydney, a lot of the interaction that our students have is with those that are standing in the classroom or in the lecture theatre. So they form a big part of the perception and the experience that our students have. And it's about how do we support that and make that as consistent as possible through all the other touch points. But we're a really large and complex organisation, and there are multiple disciplines that have a different approach to how they teach and their methods and so on. So it's about how do we pull the most consistent thread through that. So it would be not right for me to say that I'm in charge of customer experience, or in fact any one person is. I think what this year has taught us is that we all are much more keenly aware of what that experience is and the one that we want to deliver. And I think, Suze, you made a really good point about, I think customer experience before has been thought about how do we make that experience frictionless and how do we improve the pain points and come around them. And what we've had to do this year is really invent a whole bunch of stuff from the ground up that we didn't anticipate. And one of the things that we've dealt with is graduation. So a lot of students imagine, the goal at the end of their studies is being able to walk into the Great Hall and accept their testama, congratulating them on their achievement. And that just wasn't possible because of the pandemic. So for 18,000 students, we needed to rethink that experience entirely and get to the real core of what we were trying to deliver. And that really took a lot of creativity from a lot of different parts of the organisation who would typically be involved in one of those graduation ceremonies. But rather than sort of try and do a version of what we would normally deliver and film it and deliver it, we said, let's mix this up, let's reinvent this. People want to celebrate with their families, and we can't facilitate that in the Great Hall, but we can help them take the party to their house. So that's what we did. We did the first live stream virtual graduation with some pre-filmed and some live elements. We had some people socially distanced in the Great Hall with the big speech from the Vice-Chancellor. Because we really recognised what was the essence of the experience that people wanted from their graduation moment. And although, of course, we would love for them to be able to walk the hall of the Great Hall and see the stained glass and have that moment, what's the next best possible way we could have delivered that? And the feedback we got from those students, in 90 countries around the world tuning in with their family and friends, was that we came as close as we could given the circumstances. And that took an incredible amount of creativity and courage, frankly, which are core values for the university that I'm really proud that we were able to meet. But reimagining from the ground up is a really big part of what we'd had to do this year, not just sort of smooth out the edges.
And that's not just the marketing or communications department. I'm assuming that there's a lot of different organizational silos or functions involved in how you were able to really change that at speed.
Absolutely. No one person can deliver a program like that in isolation, and we use some external partners to support us in that. And that is a true collaborative effort, which also, takes some innovation to think more broadly than just what can we deliver. How do we draw on other strengths? And I think those kind of agile project teams that they put a problem in front of you rather than we need to deliver graduations. We need a problem to solve here. And I think that model of bringing the right expertise into a conversation at the right time is also part of thinking creatively to solve a customer experience challenge.
So, Suzanne, I'm just curious here, and looking at this from a leadership perspective, how can organisations ensure that they're drawing on creative inputs from across the organisations in situations like the one that was facing the University of Sydney, or in other particular contexts that you're seeing your clients driving?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of different ways. I mean, I think one of the great things about this pandemic and the way that everybody's had to pivot to new ways of working, is it's made us really think about how do we get more people, more diversity into our organizations? How do we get more diversity into problem solving? There's been a lot of research into, diverse teams and the impact of diverse teams. And when I talk about diversity, I don't just mean gender, I mean in particular experience diversity. How do you get people who have lots of experience, but people who've got hardly any experience, to come together to problem solve? And one of the great things about obviously what we're doing today in virtual working is actually it's easier to bring different groups of people together who maybe haven't worked before together to solve problems. And we've seen huge lift in sort of ideation around problem solving when we've done that. And so I believe that it comes from leadership. You have to foster a real sort of culture of empowerment to think differently and to be able to have a voice at the table. And I think as leaders, if we can do that and bring those diverse teams together, then who knows what we can achieve.
And it sounds there that we're really kind of empowering various parts of the organization to say that, hey, creativity is not just for the designers or the artists in the room or in the virtual room, but it is, again, across the entire organization. Johanna, from your perspective as an enterprise leader, how do you broaden the conversation around creativity so that truly everyone, again, feels empowered, but also that they have some responsibility to drive creativity at this time?
As I mentioned before, we're fortunate in that one of the core values at the University of Sydney is courage and creativity, and I think the two are paired really well. So for many of our academics, their career has been built on challenging the status quo and thinking differently about a problem or a challenge in search of another way, a better way, new knowledge. So creativity in many ways is baked into the DNA of the people that we work with every day in marketing communications. So for them, it's not an unusual thing when we say, hang on, we think there's another way around this. The balancing act of that, and I think this is where we get into the art and the science of it, is that you need the data to back you up when you're talking to academics. They're a very well-informed, very rational audience. So we have a saying, don't bring a hunch to a data fight, and that's where our use of all the tools that we've got at our disposal to prove our case. Because creativity in the art and design space is often quite, it's subjective, right? But creativity in innovation and in customer experience, it can be objective and informed by data. And that's where, test and learn, experimentation, failing and moving on. And I think you mentioned it before, Suze, that culture of psychological safety where it's okay to put a crazy idea out there that might be a bit different and see what happens. I think that's part of a little bit of the not fly by the seat of your pants, but the pace of change that we've needed to respond to this year has really helped foster that culture of let's give it a go.
I think, this very much mirrors what we spoke about just a couple of weeks ago on this show, where we spoke about data's role in creativity, and where we made the point that really organizations and brands today can only really truly claim to be customer-centric and human-centric when they are also extremely data-centric as well. Suzanne, I'm just curious, what impact have you seen from non-traditional creative teams really taking on more of this creative mantle and adopting new processes and new mindsets around creativity?
We've just seen a real appetite for embracing new technology and new processes. I think, especially recently, where we've had we're sort of all in this together. We've got to find new ways. And we've certainly seen an ability to really move these programs of work much quicker by taking bigger risks, using technology to deal with the mundane and the routine, and then empowering teams to do the bit that only humans can do, which is to lead with empathy and to really think creatively about how we solve the problems. And just the sort of the massive momentum that we've seen and the pace of change that we've seen has been pretty beautiful to witness, to be perfectly honest.
Yes, I'm curious. I mean, with COVID as well, it's certainly, epidemiologically, easy to say if you're Swedish, there's been a sense, and certainly the data has shown that COVID has in some ways exposed pre-existing, health conditions. But it's also been said that it's been exposing pre-existing, business conditions. If retailers or people in other industries had pre-existing conditions that maybe weren't fit for the 21st century, they were sort of exposed. Have you seen any difference, Suzanne, in businesses that maybe were, laggards of new technologies versus those that were early adopters of new technologies or even innovators in terms of how they've been able to embrace creativity and really have it as a cornerstone of their customer experiences?
What I would say is, whether they're early adopters or laggards, I would use a slightly different framework. I would say that what we have seen is that those organizations who were some way, it didn't matter how much they'd done, but if they were somewhere on their digital transformation journey, even if they were only 10% of the way there, but they'd started that process, those organizations have found it much easier to make the change and to move with momentum. Where we've seen organizations who have still been debating whether they need to digitally transform, do they not have a burning platform, they're the organizations that have really struggled and have, even when they've moved at pace, are really only, they're surviving, right? At best, they're surviving. Whereas other organizations who are that bit further along and had maybe moved some of their structures, had embedded reimagination in their teams, they were able to pivot that much quicker. And I would put it in that terminology, really. You needed to be out of the gates when this happened, otherwise the gates stayed shut for a little bit too long.
Now, it's been said that, digital disruption in some ways, which we've had for, 10, 20 years now, was in some ways the precursor or the dress rehearsal for any business model's digital transformation. And really the pandemic has become the burning platform when we really need to now move at speed, as you point out. Johanna, at the University of Sydney, what are the biggest challenges you've faced as an enterprise leader in terms of really getting the university and its talent to really adopt new types of creative processes?
I think that the challenge has been doing that in the midst of everyone's personal context this year. I'm coming to you from my front room with Lego and pictures behind me. Everyone has their own version of what the pandemic experience was for them. And at a time when we're under pressure at work to really innovate, lift our game, progress our digital agenda, with everyone's context, that has been a real challenge as a leader, to be mindful of that. Some people are able to lean into that and catch that wave of momentum and are energized by the pressure, and others just had to say, I just can't today. I've got to teach year 2 maths or whatever the case may be. And I think as a leader, being really mindful of how we bring different opportunities for people where they're at. It's a bit of customer experience for our own teams, right? So what are the multiple entry points to be able to participate in a project or in an opportunity, depending on how much you have to offer? I think, we had some project teams working on kind of really short-term responsive communications. We had other teams who were working on slightly longer-term, less time critical, but really important deliverables. That meant there was a bit more flexibility in how they participated. And we have lots of tools, like everyone does, to make sure that everyone's got visibility of those things and can interject their ideas along the way. And there are check-in points. But as a leader, that probably is the biggest challenge, when you need your people to really rise to the occasion. And don't get me wrong, they absolutely did. And we're really proud of the work we've done. It's also in a context for everyone that was sometimes really personally tricky and continues to be. And that's something that's probably not going to change anytime soon.
And
yeah,
Suzanne,
I think, sorry, if I'd like to just add something. That's a really good point, Joanna. I think, what we're seeing as leaders is the need for empathy in everything that we do is really important, be that in dealing with our people, in understanding ourselves, but even more important, we talk about data and the impact of data on customer experience, but data without empathy is meaningless. We need to be able to put ourselves in our customers, our students, and our citizens' shoes if we're to deliver exceptional customer experiences. So empathy is a word and a feeling and something that we've all had to embrace in all of this this time, and it really has become a really important skill that we need to foster and encourage.
And as the thought leader and philosopher Brené Brown said, stories are data with a soul, and certainly both at the University of Sydney and no doubt through Adobe's customer network and through its partners, I guess that you see lots of very, very personal stories, right? Data with souls that we can wrap our creativity around. I'm curious, if we look towards the future, maybe even, if we dare dream about a post-pandemic future, what do you see as being next for customer experience, Johanna?
Oh, that's a really tricky question because there's so many unknowns about what we're facing next. I think for customer experience, as you say, the expectations are high. So I think, how do we continue to meet those and then keep reinventing? So we've already taken it up quite a ways. How do we sustain that? I think in a blended online and hopefully in real life world, if we return to some more normality, how do we continue to bring those two experiences together? Because people will have a very personal response and preference to how they want to engage with the university, for example. And we're already looking at what that might mean for next year if our borders remain closed. Even if they remain open, there'll be some students who just prefer to manage their learning in the safety of their own space, at their own pace. So we're already looking at how do we reinvent some of our teaching to do that, and working with our students and involving them in that process, I think is really important.
Suzanne, any thoughts if you were to be a science fiction author or the futurist visionary here for a moment? What's next in customer experience at Adobe?
And as I think you're the one with the title futurist in your job title, so I won't challenge you too much on that. Look, I think for us it's really to take the point that Joanna said. We really, customer expectations are not going to go backwards from here. So how do we continue to embrace the momentum that we've got and continue to understand what's working in delivering those customer experiences and use the data really to continue to reimagine what good looks like and set the bar as high as possible? Because one thing's for sure, our customers, our students and our citizens are going to expect it.
Now, that kind of brings us to the last over in this very profound innings, and that's a Swedish person using an Australian or an Anglo metaphor. I'm just curious to see if you have any final thoughts on customer experience and how creativity and customer experience really go hand in hand, Johanna, from your perspective, and any parting words.
I think it draws together a couple of things that we've talked about, that ultimately customers aren't one big block of thing. They are individuals with very different, separate personal experiences. And often the most powerful jumping off point for a creative solution is understanding one person's problem and experience along the way. It's why, personas have taken off the way they have. And I love nothing more than when I get in my inbox or we get, as feedback, a particular story about someone who's interacted with our website or our social media or a piece of communication with some feedback to say, this really worked for me and here's why, or here's what you missed. That's often the most informative jumping off point. It's always a really personal story, and that, it's a creative problem to solve, and the team runs really hard at that. And I think that's kind of at the heart of creativity for customer experience, is remembering that it's not just one block of people, it's sometimes just one person that can start that idea going.
Right. Suzanne, any final thinklets from your perspective?
I just say that, let's not lose sight of what creativity really is. Creativity is all about problem solving. It's all about insight. It's hugely about collaboration and ideation. And I think us as leaders in the industry, it's up to us as leaders to give our people the opportunity and empower them to be as creative as they possibly can.
And I think the heartening thing in all of that is perhaps through having this digital layer of remote work in some ways, where the physical world maybe brought us into these separate silos. Truly, the digital layer through remote work now has maybe broken down some of that silo mentality and actually enabled new type of collaboration and creativity inside of organizations. It's been fantastic having you both on the show. And I look forward to seeing all of you guys out there in the virtual world next Tuesday, which brings us to our final episode of this creative leadership series hosted by Adobe CQ, Making the Modern Leader. I'm going to be joined then next Tuesday, same time, same channel, by Prue Cox, who is the Director of Marketing Solutions at LinkedIn. Very fittingly, will be on LinkedIn Live, and Simon Dale, who is the Managing Director for Adobe in Southeast Asia. Well, we're going to explore why leaders need a strong knowledge of technology in order to harness it as an augmenter of human skills. I look forward to seeing you, same channel, same time next Tuesday. See you in the future.